Alright, 7th grade, this is going to be a practice test for what your real test will look like. So copy down the problems, and if you have questions, bring them back to class tomorrow. Let's look at the first problem. So the first problems on the test will just be simplifying, and if you take a look at the instructions, you can see that they're going to be talking about multiplying and dividing. And so that's with integers, positive and negative numbers. And so if you wanted to remind yourself of the rules, you could remind that a positive times a positive equals a positive, and a negative times a negative equals a negative, and a positive times a negative is equal to a negative. And I just put little reminders like that on the side of my paper, and that way then I can double check my answers with it. So number one, we have a positive times a negative, so we know our answer is going to be a negative. And remember, we can do 8 times 10, which is 80, plus 8 times 2, which is 16, and we can get 96. And this is our final answer. You can also do it the traditional method and say 8 times 2 is 16, carry my 1, 8 times 1 is 8, plus 1 is 9, 96. Okay? And then it's negative because you have a positive times a negative. Number 2, it's a negative divided by a positive, which means that my answer is going to be negative, and 99 divided by 11 is a math fact, so it is 9. That's something that I actually have to solve. Let's look at the next problems. Number 3 is simplifying, but using some absolute values. So I always take a look at what the topic is, because that's going to help me. And I'm going to be a stickler on your steps, so I really want you to show an equal to sign. And the first step would be to solve what's in that absolute value. So a negative 23 absolute value is really 23 plus 50, and 23 plus 50 is 73. And if you needed to do the adding, I would expect to see it over here. Okay, and it is a positive answer. We box it. Number 4 says, describe the term absolute value. And then it says, use 2 methods below to describe absolute value. So the definition you could put as the distance away from 0. And then you should probably put in there that distance is always positive. And even though I'm abbreviating, I really expect you to be, I really expect you to write it out in a complete sentence. B, if I was going to do B and give an example, I might show something like negative 4 absolute value is equal to 4, and the absolute value of positive 4 is equal to 4. And I would show both because remember, absolute value has 2 answers always. And if I was going to do a diagram, I might do something like, what's the absolute value of negative 4? And I would show 0, and I'd show negative 4. And then I would show some hops to show the distance. Okay? And say equal to 4. All right, so those are the 3 different ways to answer the problem. If you can come up with a different diagram, that's fine with me. The next set says that we are adding and subtracting, and this is kind of our very basic. So this is the review problems from last week. So we have a positive 18 and a negative 29, and we're adding them together. So when I look at that, I look and I say, oh, this 29 is bigger, so my answer is going to be negative. And then in my head I say, all right, I better do the math over here, and because they're different, I'm going to subtract, and I get 11. So negative 11 is my answer. And number 6, I would like to see something along the lines of negative 37 plus a negative 21. And that way then you can show that you caught that step of changing subtraction to addition and changing the power. And then you can look at it and you can say, oh, I have negatives and I have more negatives and I'm adding them together. So my answer must be negative. And let's do the adding. and we get negative 58. And we box our answer. And the last type of problem is a GEMDAS problem, order of operations. Okay, if you look at the title, it says order of operations. So I'm going to write GEMDAS on the side of my paper. And then I'm going to make sure that I show my steps according to GEMDAS. So the first thing is grouping symbols. So I'm going to leave everything else alone, and I'm going to do what's in the grouping symbols. And now I'm done. So next part is exponents. I do have an exponent, so I'm going to leave everything else alone, and 4 squared is 16 because it's 4 times 4. And now I'm done. And so I have to do multiplication and division left to right. Well, there's no multiplication, but there is division, so I'm going to leave everything else alone. And 16 divided by 8 is 2. So I'm done with multiplication and division. Now I'm going to do adding and subtracting, left to right. 20 minus 2 is 18. And I'm going to box my answer. All right, that's the end of your practice problems for tonight. Make sure you come back with any questions you have for me before the test tomorrow.